Hello, everyone. This is Ben Marchman with NatureLink, and I want to welcome you to the FireKeepers Global Summit, in which we will gather for powerful conversations with cutting-edge experts and thought leaders who will guide you to connect to your truest self and activate your natural gifts. This event is designed to reinstate the importance of carrying our soul-directed vision back into our communities so that ourselves and our communities will flourish. Here you're invited to learn how to seek the guidance of your inner voice so that you can truly understand what it means to live life with purpose. I'm very excited today to be speaking with Ilarion, who also goes by Ilarion Merculieff, and who was raised in the traditional Unangan Aleut way, and he received his tribal name Kuuyux at age 4, and the name is given to one person in each lifetime amongst his people. Kuuyux means an arm extending out from the body, a carrier of ancient knowledge into modern times, a messenger. Today he is living up to the legacy of his name. He has over 4 decades of experience serving his people, the Unangan of the Pribilof Islands and the Indigenous peoples around the world in a number of capacities. His reach has been broad and varied. A few of his positions he's held include City Manager of St. Paul Island, Commissioner of the Alaska Department of Commerce and Economic Development, President and CEO of the Tanadgusix Corporation, Chairman of the Board of the Aleut Corporation, Co-Chair of the Japan-Alaska Fishery Cooperative, Chair of the Alaska State Bond Committee, Vice Chair of the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Committee, and Deputy Director of the Alaska Native Science Commission. From 2000 to 2003, he served as the Director of the Department of Public Policy and Advocacy in the Rural Alaska Community Action Program. And as a director, he led the largest subsistence rights march in Alaska's history, and also the substance rally after the march. The march was instrumental in protecting Alaska Native subsistence rights, which were legally contested by the state of Alaska to fish for salmon along Alaska rivers. He also led a 4-year effort and campaign to gain federal and state recognition of Alaska Native rights to catch and eat halibut throughout coastal Alaska. He is also the co-founder and former chairman of the Alaska Indigenous Council on Marine Mammals, former chairman of the Nature Conservancy and the Alaska chapter, and former co-director of the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society. Excuse me. And also the co-founder of the International Bering Sea Forum, the Alaskan Forum of the Environment, and the Alaska Oceans Network. He has also served on the National Research Committee on the Bering Sea ecosystem and presented at numerous conferences. There's a lengthy bio, but I want to stop there and let you expound a little bit more on your work. But I'm just so excited to talk to you today and to talk about your subject, which you presented as the real human being from an Indigenous point of view. So welcome.
Thank you. Ang wan kelamekam na kelam kasuda ting Unangan way Unangan aksasta Kuuyux ting kawalangan Unangan way. I said good morning. It's morning here in Alaska, and the morning tastes good. That's the way we greet each other every day. And I said ang wan, which means hello, my other self. This is what our people say to each other all the time. And it's a very spiritual view that we carry. And that I said that my traditional name is Kuuyux. As you explained, I was given that name at 4 years old. And we're called Unangan. And it means in Western terms, or in Western way of calling us, they call us Aleut, not Aleut. And I'm from the Pribilof Islands in the middle of the Bering Sea. We're called, and I said, Kawalangan Unangan way, we're people of the sea lion, the stellar sea lion. We have a very close reciprocal relationship with stellar sea lions. And so, you know, my people have been out in the Bering Sea for over 10,000 years, and we're still there, which is a testament to the strength and spirituality of my people, because very few Indigenous people can say that they still are on the lands and waters that they traditionally came from, but we are. And so that's a little bit about the people that I come from, but also I should point out that we live in the Aleutian chain in Pribilof Islands in the Bering Sea, and it's a place that is very difficult to eke out a living, but yet we developed the most densely populated linear mile of shoreline in North America for our time. In the entire continent, we had the most dense population of anyone. And we had no food storage technologies. We were the only Alaska Native group that had no food storage technologies, except for wind drying. And we had a very spiritual view about this. And when you think about the fact that it's very hard to eke out a living, and yet we had the most dense population of people along any shoreline in North America, we did it because, as one of my elders said, look, even the birds don't worry about how they get their food the next day. Are we any different? And of course, my people truly knew that we were no different than any other animal, and we should not worry about where we're going to get the food the next day. That's why we had no food storage technologies. And we were the only people in Alaska that didn't have footwear, even in the wintertime. Just, you know, like the llamas in Tibet, you sit on the snow and they melt it. Well, that's the way our people were. So quite remarkable. And we can trace our ancestry from Egypt to Outer Mongolia to Siberia, Kamchatka, and across by boat.
So one of the amazing upbringing that you had too, and it's just my heart goes out to that, and the way that you're still bringing this traditional knowledge to your work today, which to me is really inspiring. And being out in the Aleutian Islands years ago when I was working out there, I was also inspired. Just, I mean, what a place to grow up. It's beautiful out there.
Yep, that's so true. I mean, my childhood was a combination of darkness and light. From the light side, I had a very traditional upbringing. So I had to be where the entire village raised me, literally, where I had to spend equal time with the men and equal time with the women, equal time with the elders, and equal time with my peers. And with the men, I learned the traditional ways of manhood during that time, and hunting and fishing, all those kind of technologies. And with the women, I learned the women's ways. With the elders, all I would do every weekend would just listen to stories year after year from age 5 to age 13. And then with my peers, my job was to play. And so we would just play all day. I was always greeted like the long lost son by any household that I would go to, day or night. You know, I would walk into a house and they would say, "Ang lakaya kanguda kakad ungachidwad." And what it means is, come in, sit down, eat, boy. And so I would always be greeted that way. And I was never scolded in my entire life, and especially as a child. And very few, I find that in all my talks around the world, very few people have grown up, never been scolded. And, you know, I would never be chastised for anything. I was always honored as a spirit being in living in human form, and not. And so the only difference between the adult and the child, in our view, is that we lack experience in human form. And so the adult's responsibility is simply to create the space for us to learn, and not tell us what to learn, how to learn, or define anything. And I grew up not asking a single question from the get-go. I had to figure it out. I had to watch, I had to listen, I had to learn. That was my job. And so the men, when they would take me out hunting, there would be usually 4 or 5 guys that would take us along, and it's a way of mentorship of the young people to young men, to enculturate them in the traditional ways without them telling us, here's how you use a rifle, here's how you aim, you know, here's how we watch the animal. They didn't explain a thing. I had to learn it the natural way. And this is the way, what we call the way of the real human being. Every child that is born is genius. They're at genius levels when they're born and when they're young. And then somehow the adults, we step in there and we interfere with their sacred path, and they no longer have the creativity that is natural to all of us. And so in the Western way, we are told what to learn, how to learn, and we define everything. And that it's totally opposite. In fact, Yupik elders, which are in southwestern Alaska, they call this the reverse society, or the inside out society, because we reversed all the laws for living. And one of the most significant ones is that now the mind is the center of human intelligence, and the mind is telling the heart what to do, where traditionally we would have the heart tell the mind what to do. And the mind's job is simply to implement what the heart is telling you. And, you know, I always ask people, well, what's in your heart? What does your heart say you love, that you must do? And many people can't tell, because their mind, being as clever as it is, lets you think that what is being said inside of you is your heart. And so the mind is constantly interfering. And I like to say it's the ego control that wants to survive, and it knows that if the heart takes control, it loses, and it will not survive. And so it comes up with all these ingenious strategies to make us think that it's our heart talking. Well, I grew up in a way that I learned actually from the birds at 6 years old how not to think, how not to have a single word come through my mind, and just be. And this is when I felt like this is when the intelligence of the real human being started to activate in me where, well, I'll tell you that story about how I did that. I love the seabirds. And the Pribilof Islands were, we call it the Galapagos of the North. And when I was a child, it had about 2 million seabirds of all kinds of species. Thick-billed murres, common murres, pelagic cormorants, red-faced cormorants, fulmars, red-legged kittiwake, black-legged kittiwake, least auklets, crested auklets, tufted puffins, horned puffins, all kinds of species. And I loved, as a child, to go underneath the bird cliffs to watch them as they awake and come out from the ledges on the cliffs. And I would walk out of the village. It's about 3 miles outside the village. There's no lights of any kind, and frequently there's no lights, natural light either, because we get 20 days of sunshine a year in the Pribilof Islands, believe it or not. It's mostly cloudy or foggy. And so I would walk at 3 o'clock in the morning by myself out into the darkness to go out to the bird cliff. And so I'd go underneath the bird cliffs, and there's large basalt boulders underneath the bird cliffs. And the bird cliffs are basalt boulders. And so I would feel my way through. And can you imagine doing that, or letting a 6-year-old do that by themselves today? No.
Yeah.
It would be considered child abuse. But this was the way of our people. And so we did that. And so I would get out there before sunrise. And at sunrise, the birds start waking up and flying. And they would fly in a circle in front of the bird cliffs and waiting to collect members of their species before they go out foraging. And then, so they would be flying in every direction at different speeds and different heights, different locations, different places, all at the same time. And underneath that bird cliff that I went to must have been, at least 10,000 seabirds. That's a lot. And so thousands of seabirds going in every which direction, apparent chaos. Then one day, I'm 6 years old, one day I wonder, how do the birds do that? I noticed that they didn't even clip a wing. And there are thousands of them there flying in every direction. And I wondered, well, what's the difference between a seabird and a human being? And so I thought, well, human beings think. Birds don't think. They just, I didn't have the words at that time. They're just a field of awareness. And that field of awareness is a form of intelligence that allows them to maneuver around each other. And so I decided, I want to be a seabird. I want to be a bird. I just want to be a bird. And I'm going to work at being a bird. And so it took me a couple months, but then I worked at not thinking. And after 2 months, I could not have a word come through my head for hours. And I can still do that today. And that's when I started to discover the real human being. Because when we went out hunting, the men would sit down on basalt boulders waiting for sea lions to come by in the ocean. And the reason that we did is because in the fall, winter, spring, it's too rough for our boats to be out there. So you had to be on land and have a high-powered rifle. And the men would sit out there we'd go out hunting, maybe we get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, have breakfast, go out in the trucks 12 miles out of the village. And my island that I grew up in was only 12 miles long and 5 miles wide, very tiny. And so here we are. And so we go out there and we just sit and wait before daybreak until maybe 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, 7 or 8 hours. And as a child, by noon, I was daydreamy or sleepy, and I would just zone out. But the men never did. But they weren't very noisy, very active. They didn't talk very much. They just focused on the ocean, and they never got daydreamy or sleepy. And I thought, wow, that's really magical. And then all of a sudden, then someone would say, "Kawakako, sea lion coming." And instantly, and I mean instantly, every person, without the person who said the sea lion was coming, looked at the same spot in the ocean. And mind you, this is 180 degrees of ocean. We're on an island. 180 degrees of ocean. The sea lion could be anywhere, but they look at one spot. And I look at the spot and look at it, and there's no sea lion. But they are still looking as if there's a sea lion there. So I decided I'm going to look too and keep watching. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, the sea lion would pop up exactly where they were looking. And I thought that was magical. And what they did was to learn the same way I did from the seabirds, where we get out of the head. And when I said, okay, I'm going to start doing this thing that I learned from the birds out hunting, and I'm 6 years old, and that's when the magic happened. I could feel where the sea lion is going to pop up and when a sea lion is coming. I could feel it. And that's what the men were doing. But they never told me that they had this ability. I had to learn it on my own. It's something that I feel that all human beings used to have. We used to have it all over the world, which is the native indigenous way of connecting with the Mother Earth. It's a real, true, and powerful connection, very deep. And it takes work to get there, but I feel that every human being has that capability. And we are at the point now that we need this. If the human beings are going to survive and thrive, we've got to restore that ability. And that's where I'm doing work with a group called the Wisdom Weavers of the world. And you can get to our site by going to www.wisdomweavers.world. And you'll find our site. And what we're doing is we gathered a group of elders from all over the world and asked them 2 questions. One, what is the state of the world as they see it now? And 2, what must we be doing now? Only those 2 questions. And so their messages are going to be put out on social media throughout the world. We're going to officially launch the message delivery in February of this year. And we've got 14 different countries, interpreters from 14 different countries that have volunteered to interpret what's put on the social media, including a 13.5-minute film that we're going to show the world with the messages of these elders. And so that's basically what I'm doing now is focusing on the wisdom weavers and carrying their messages. Now, there are a lot of Native people, Indigenous peoples around the world that know what these elders are saying, and they're hoping to have the world finally understand that Indigenous wisdom is needed now. All of these groups of people around the world have prophecies that talk about a time when the world will look towards Indigenous people for some of the answers to the most challenging issues we are facing. And the elders around the world have decided the time is now, and that we have to act now to change our consciousness from the mind to the heart. And to get to the heart, I mean, that's a very difficult thing for human beings to do, because you have to work through all of the generations of pain and trauma that we experience, that is downloaded through our mothers to us, and what we experience in our lifetime, real traumas. And you know, we don't know what we don't know. And Native people, Indigenous people, not all of them, mind you, but many Indigenous people around the world, in locations around the world, understand that trauma is passed on to the child as soon as we scold the child. And that's why my people never scolded anyone, because as a spirit being in human form, as a child, we are so open, so exposed. We don't have any defenses. And anything that is critical goes right to us, right to our hearts. And so when we scold someone, we're injuring the soul. And so that's one way of injury. Other ways of injury is we're seeing that in the world today with murders and suicides and wars and refugees and all of these kinds of things that the world is wanting to stop, but they don't seem to be able to do it. And the elders are saying, what we choose to focus on becomes our reality. And so if we choose to focus on the wars, the suicides, the alcoholism, the heart problem, the health problems, the refugees, the abuse and violation of women, that is an existing situation. And if we pour our life force, our energy, our hearts, our minds, our spirit into that, we're feeding the very thing we're trying to stop. And that instead we say, yeah, there are things that happen that we must intervene on. And so we stand there to stop it out of love, but do not focus all of our energy there. We must focus it instead on the world we want to see. And that right now, that focus is the reality we're facing. We have growing conflicts around the world. We have growing health problems. We have growing all the abuse of women, the suicide. I mean, here in Alaska, the suicide rate amongst Alaska Native people are equal to that or surpasses in many cases the ghettos of the US. and it's getting worse. And yet, despite that, we're pouring thousands and thousands of people of good heart that are focusing on these issues, and millions of dollars. But yet it's getting worse. Now look at environmental organizations. We have more environmental organizations around the world that exist today than there were 30 years ago. But yet Mother Earth's life support systems are coming to the edge. And no one asks why. And the reason why is what the elders are saying. They're concentrating on reaction to something rather than action.
Yeah, and not really summing up all that you're saying, but it's just, there's not a better time to be doing this work, as you're saying, especially with wisdom weavers, which to me is beyond inspiring work. And we're in this time, in this actually decade of 2020, where a lot of this is it's almost beyond needed, and it's all part of us, and then this needs to be it's almost it's just a reawakening in a deeper way, and get into that heart, like you said. And also, I'm just empowered as well and inspired by your work and how you're pulling these issues and these times and these cultures and the whole human race behind the concepts of culture, community wellness, say traditional ways of living, indigenous wisdom, elder wisdom, and climate change, which is all so needed to be all in one package. And like what you're just saying with the conservation companies, that there's so many. I used to work with the Nature Conservancy, and you're involved with so many other conservation companies, and they're all just working for the one thing. And I always just used to think wow, there's so many of us, these chapters, that don't communicate with each other. And it's just repetition.
Yep, that's so true. And this is one of the things, the missions of the wisdom weavers, is to weave together human beings and organizations that are of like mind and heart around the world. For too long now, we're working on advocating for certain things. Like I was just at a meeting in San Francisco, and it was a group of people who want to make change in the world, real change, heartfelt change, but they didn't know how to do it, and so they're working at it, and they are frustrated that they don't know what they can do, and they're not people that minimize what they can accomplish, because these were so-called movers and shakers in the Western tradition, and they were planning to plant 6 trillion trees in South America as their answer, and so I came along and told them that the indigenous way would be to focus on process and not the goal. And that if we prepare the process properly, the goal always far exceeds individual expectation. And so they agreed to allow me to facilitate their gathering. And what we did is we shifted. The decision to plant 6 trillion trees was made by men. I said, okay, let's try something different. If you're willing, let's just have the women discuss this issue and see what they come up with. And so the men would just watch. The women deliberated, and they decided that the best thing that they can do to help in South America is to consult and develop real partnerships with Indigenous people who live in the area to figure out what's the best thing to do in that area. I mean, that was incredible, just by shifting the paradigm that we worked with. Instead of top down, work in a circle. The women got into a circle and they talked very openly and very plainly and very truthfully about what was going on for them and what they saw collectively. And so it was a good thing to witness and to be part of. And so you talk about these organizations that have been trying to do good. They are people of good heart, but their hearts are focused first on the mind. And the mind in the Western society is looked at as the source of intelligence of the human being. When Indigenous people look at the source of intelligence of the real human being as being the whole makeup of the human being. So when you ask our elders, what's the source of our cultures and the purpose of it? And they say, well, our teacher for the origins of our culture is the 2-year-old child. The 2-year-old child. And when you look at the 2-year-old child, because they said the 2-year-old child is unquestionably a real human being. And when you look at them, when they get angry, they engage their whole bodies. And they just go for it, and then within minutes it's gone. They might they might be real mad at somebody, pure that they're mad at, and they would express their anger, and then within 2 minutes it's done with, and they're playing together again, like they're they just love each other. And they don't have the defense mechanisms that we developed as we became older. They're just natural. And I saw a 2-year-old child in a gathering of Native people, about 2,000 Native people, and in the middle and we were sitting in a gigantic circle, and in the middle of the circle walks a 2-year-old child, buck naked. And she wasn't, self-conscious at all. That's the real human being. So our elders, now the definition of an elder, many people talk about that and they don't know what an elder is. An elder is not necessarily a function of age, although sometimes it takes that age to get the experience. I know a 5-year-old elder, and he knows 4 languages fluently. No one ever taught him. And the elders go to him to remember the old words. And he's 5 years old. And that's an elder. An elder is a wisdom keeper and a tradition bearer, and contains life wisdom that people go to. They're understood to be people that a real elder never calls themselves an elder. It's other people that call the elder an elder. And so the elders say that what they have is the innocence of the child and the wisdom of the elders. And you cannot be an elder without both aspects, your inner child and your inner wisdom working together. And
yeah.
So,
thanks for clarifying that too. I'm sure a lot of speakers are actually wondering that we're in this culture, like you're saying, that people think that elder just means old, or somebody who carries wisdom. And and somebody who is an elder is not going to call themselves an elder. And so it's not, it's just beyond the status piece. And I was wondering if you can expound a little bit on this concept of what I myself just call fire keeping, like fire meaning like the vision, and like the whole concept of this the summit, which you and I have been talking about, is how are we carrying this vision? Like when somebody has a bit, not a vision like visually like a dream, but when somebody has a vision, like which means like they're growing into their life purpose, their soul directed vision, and what they're born on this planet to be doing, their birthright. Their intrinsic gifts is another way to put it. And the indigenous way, is already kind of stated over and over again by yourself on how we're supporting these youth to be adults. And that's one rite of passage kind of technique. But I was wondering if you can expand a little bit more on like ways that you see our world moving in that we can do better, but also kind of instill more wisdom on like how to help people carry out their vision within their community by specifically using elderhood and this indigenous wisdom of being human.
Yeah, well, that's part of the work of the wisdom weavers also. And, I carry their messages. My spouse, Yael, she's from Israel, and we recently got married. And
congrats.
Yeah, thank you. She works with children, and she says, if you just and she does it like an elder would do it. Would look at a child and study and learn about the child by watching. And she was an alternative school teacher in Israel. And she would always work with a child. And so, for example, when two kids get into a fight, she intervenes just enough to say to them, okay, we don't want to hurt each other. Do you want to hurt somebody, hurt her? And the child would invariably say no. Says, okay, I want you two to work it out. And then she leaves them alone. And then invariably they work it out. And we don't use, what we do is we are concerned as adults to tell the child what they must do and how they must do it. And so we grow up with somebody else's template of what's right and what's wrong and how to make decisions and all of that. It's an adult's template that was imposed on you as a spirit being, rather than the understanding that, spirit, you are me and I am you and we are equal and you're no different than me and I am no more or less than you are. And that's the real human being. And so when we struggle to find out what is our passion, I talk with school kids all the time. By the time the kid hits 6th grade, the light goes out of their eyes. And before then, they retain the real human being from the earliest to less and less of a human being until at sixth grade, they've lost it. And it's very sad. And, I one time said, okay, in the class, I said, list all the bad things that you can say about yourself. And they would come up with maybe 25 or 30 different things. So, okay, now list all the good things you can say about yourself. And the most I got was 6. That there's a contrast there, and so they have accepted this paradigm that we have inherited through generation. And when you go to the younger ones, remember as a child how we used to be fascinated by looking at a bug, for example. We just look at the bug and just watch it and just watch it. And, you know, we're just fascinated by it. Or the trees or the clouds, and our imagination is full and robust. And that's the real human being that we have ironed out of ourselves. And so when we think about what is our purpose on this planet, you think about, and what the elders would do is watch the children to see who they are. And then they would give them their name, and it reflects the elders' understanding of who the child is. But it's a name that is not confining. It's not constricting. It's open. And so you look at the child and you can see certain gifts in that child. And you don't interfere with the child at all. And the gifts grow and grow and grow until you're doing what you need to do. But as Western society, we have somebody else's template put on us. And so we grow into something that we don't know who we are. And so the best thing that people can do to restore that is, first of all, shift from the mind to the heart for the adult. And let the heart tell you what you must do. And also that we must raise our children in a way that is honoring and respectful of their sacred path, and not interfere with their sacred path. And with those two, we might be able to do it. Now, I said that, you know, going from the mind to the heart is not an easy job. It's very difficult. For me, over 40 years ago, I was at the peak of patriarchy. I mean, you heard my resume. I was in the state cabinet post. I was vice chair of a $3 billion company. I mean, I achieved the peak of patriarchy in Western society. And in one day, I gave it all up. And I was chairing or facilitating 17 boards and councils during that time. And I gave that all up. I gave up planning my career. I let go of everything. And people thought I was crazy. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to survive at all economically. But I had the inspiration of my people that said, just trust. Trust in life, trust in your body, trust in the universe, trust in the whole, the maker, the spirit that lives in all things. Trust implicitly at every level, to the point of it being embodied in every cell of your body. Not trust that's developed by the mind. Just trust. And all things will be taken care of. And indeed, for over 40 years, I've been an independent consultant. And I didn't worry about where I was going to get my money to survive. But I always was given enough for what I needed. Not what I wanted, but what I needed. And every single year for 40 years. And that's what it's going to take to jump. The Hopi and Maori say, let go of the sides of the riverbank, move to the center, find those who have done the same, and celebrate. What that means is letting go of the sides of the riverbank is letting go of all your attachments, including attachment to money. All of it. You let it go. It's like jumping off a cliff. You don't know what's going to happen. And then go to the center means going to your heart, your life center, and the center of the river of life. because the river of life knows where it's going. You don't. We don't. And find those who have done the same. Find those who have had the courage to jump like you did. And those are your new tribal members. The definition of tribe is going to change during this time. And it's going to mean people of like mind and heart to you. And you celebrate because not only have you found someone that is your soul match or soul whatever it might be called, but you are with someone that understands the process that you went through and understand that we're human beings, and so we fall down sometime and we need encouragement or affirmation of what we're doing. And so, you know, I work with the Wisdom Weaver team. The core team are people like that. They are true family. And I can share with them anything that is going on with me, and they will be supportive. It is truly a time of celebration to celebrate that.
Yeah, and what an honor. And yeah, that word trust, this in general can be a whole hour conversation on what that means. And I think you summed that up really, really nicely. It just reminds me of a quote. An elder in our community here actually mentioned that after a quest, he would always just mention, trust so deeply in yourself and surrender so deeply and pray like hell. And that's when others will really see your gifts. And I love that. And like, it doesn't really make too much sense, but if you think about it, you're thinking too hard about it. It's just, trust so deep in yourself and the process and just that process of surrendering. Yeah. And then others really see you who you are.
That surrendering means you let go of what other people think also.
Exactly.
And there was a time since the beginning of time, since before the beginning of time, when people used to be who they are and be supported by everybody else, and they understood this process of being a real human being, and they developed systems that didn't require control, which is a masculine imbalance principle. Control and management are masculine imbalance principles. And it's top down. You've got the head of the organization going all the way down to, what they see as janitor. And when in reality, the truth is, there is no, when you go to top-down management, it is already going to produce things that are going to be out of balance. Anything that they produce, any top-down organization is going to produce an imbalance in one form or another. And that when you are gathered together in a circle, not in top-down, then you begin to see the value of that. And I have worked with the principle of circles with people all my life, where when I do planning for an organization, I involve everybody as equals. You're no better than me, you're no higher than me, we are equal. And so when I worked for the state of Alaska, that's the principle I used in a job I was assigned to do, to reorganize all the economic development elements of the state of Alaska, the forest department, the oil and gas department, all these different departments. And I involved everybody in all the organizations that were involved with those things, from the janitor on up, and made no distinction about title. And what we came out with, well, let me put it this way: the economic development arm was the most productive arm in the state of Alaska of all the divisions in the state of Alaska. And we produced more in 1 year than any other division in state government because we involved everybody. And when we finally said, okay, here's the plan, it was a plan of everyone and they were committed to it. And that's why I became Commissioner of Commerce and Economic Development. I was the lead honcho in patriarchy because I did that. And if you do it properly, it always far exceeds individual expectation.
Yeah.
And so I wonder about, all the organizations that are in existence today that are top down, including all of our environmental organizations. Where is that leading us?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's actually a good question to sum up the rest of the hour here. We're getting to the top of the hour, and that could lead into the next question. Like, where do you see your work with the wisdom weavers? Like, where is that call leading you, and how? Like, you kind of expounded on it a little bit, but if you wanted to share more on that, you're totally open to do that.
Yeah, we're not an organization. We're an organization. We are an organization or an organism. And so we are arranged in decision-making in a circle. We are changing the paradigms that we're working with, all the paradigms, so that we work as a family and that everything is connected and interdependent. And so we are reaching out to organizations everywhere in the world that are looking at what they're doing and what hasn't worked and why it hasn't worked, and trying to look at the new organization or organism that we need to create as a result of that. And so what we're doing is working at unifying our people and the messages that each of these organizations are trying to get out alone. They either represent themselves or their region or their state or part of their continent. They're focused on a continent, and everybody is working separately. And what if we can work around the world with similar organizations that have like-minded heart, that puts out an agreement to partner up, to collaborate, to share our resources, and to act in a way ultimately that is one. That it would be a win-win situation. It's not about me representing this organization that should be put out there and compete and be a real big organization to be effective. No, to be effective, we have to cooperate and collaborate around the world. And that's the change that we are hoping to introduce while getting the messages of the elders out to the world. And so that's where we're at.
Yeah, and what a beautiful vision. And I think the message of the elders is so huge. And we've you mentioned that in your talk too, just how to bring that back in a unique way, and can be a challenge, because every community is so different. And so I just want to congratulate you again for the work that you've brought forward, and I'm hoping that all the listeners and the viewers of this interview will be inspired to help support your work, and as well as be inspired to do the same work. We're not, I was just talking with another speaker and actually a friend the other day. A lot of us just feel so alone in this work, and there's so many people that it could even be your neighbor who's doing something exactly the same. It's just being open and communicative with people.
Yep, and I travel all over the world, and what I'm finding out is that people are changing, and they're wondering now where they should go, and that's where I come in to help maybe stimulate that. But there are millions of people that are changing where they're at in their mindset and changing their consciousness. And they want to do a different thing than what has been done. Now, all the things that are in existence today, the state-of-the-art thinking, state-of-the-art technologies, are nothing but regurgitation of the old in new form.
Mm.
And that's part of the shift. When we shift, we can see how they are the old thing in new form. And they're producing things that are going to be out of balance, like we did for hundreds of years, or thousands of years, actually. And the beginning of time, by the way, was when we left the present moment. We human beings invented time when we slipped out of the present moment and being in the heart. And so we go into guilt, shame, remorse, anger, rage, jealousy, all these kind of things from the past that live with us today, or fear, which is projection into the future of something that hasn't happened, every place except now. And all we need to do is come to the now.
Yeah, exactly. I can totally relate and resonate with that. It's coming to the now. It's so powerful. Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming on today and talking with us. And also, all the speakers leave with like a free gift. And I don't think you and I were talking about that before our call. But I was wondering if you wanted to expound on a little bit of that, like something you want to leave the viewers with. It could be like advice, or it could be something on your website. It's really up to you.
Yeah, well, there are two things. One would be my own website. I don't believe in promoting myself, but the funder that I work with insists that I have something that makes it visible. And so I have a website called gcill.org. And GCILL means Global Center for Indigenous Leadership and Lifeways. And the Wisdom Weavers, I would offer your listeners and watchers to join the Wisdom Weavers and get the newsletters of what we're doing without charge. And so that would be www.wisdomweavers.world.
And for the listeners and the viewers, I would more than highly recommend getting on that website and being part of this newsletter. I'm a part of it, and it's just, like I was saying earlier, I'm just beyond inspired in this work, and we just need more people being involved in seeing this and spreading the word. So
yeah,
it's a very good gift to leave behind. And any other advice you want to leave us with before we cancel the call today?
Just remember the value of the child in each of us. Okay, and you are doing a great job in doing the kind of thing that you do to spread the messages of people around the world. So keep it up.
I appreciate it, and have a great day.
Okay, thank you.